A lot of people, they are afraid of black pine, really. The thing to do in springtime will be two things. Well, how do you turn this into something? How do you turn this into actual branches? Okay, so we want to keep two candles. So we have 1, 2, equal strength. In autumn time, then what we do is then we look at it and say, okay, these guys have really elongated, really have grown. I shouldn't have taken away my magic now. They are everywhere. Okay.
Okay, Tien. Now, there's something that's always been intriguing me, and that's pretty much how to develop a black pine branch from young to old, from a single branch to refined, from cutting the candles back to plucking. So I was just wondering if you could wrap it all up in one video.
That's a very loaded question, right? It's not a yes or no answer. A lot of people, they are afraid of black pine, really, because of exactly what you ask. And I had the same issue with them. One is, okay, they always get these long shoots, long growth from them. And there are no branches, just needles. What do you do with it? I don't know. And the needles are so long, what do you do with it? I'm not too sure. Well, where do you even start transitioning and training this into something that resembles a branch? And often you can see a lot of long growth like this. What do you do with that? Can anything grow from that? Okay, so all those are the things that that troubled me in early stages. But after we've been working on it for the last 10, 12 years and seeing a lot of examples of people try to explain how this works. So we have sort of developed a certain schedule, if you like. Okay, in springtime, you do this. Summertime, you do this. Autumn time, you do this. So we definitely have figured out a plan to deal with how to develop the tree. When it's young, we do this. When it's sort of more or less developed, we're branching in place, we do this. And when the trees are a lot more established, we do this. All right, so let's start from the younger stages. Okay, so we'll talk about spring, summer, and autumn. What do we do in springtime? Okay, spring. So the thing to do in springtime will be two things. One is equal allocation of needles. That means the tree has different vigor, but we would like to give the tree same amount of needles on each branch. All right, so what that does is we are communicating with the tree. Almost in a way saying that I know you want to be a big tall tree, but look after your other branches too. So how do we do that? Is by giving the tree same amount of needles across the whole tree. Okay, so then that comes through our plucking or trimming the needles off. Okay, so, and the second thing what we do in springtime is you can probably see the tree is pushing out. Before needles come through, they come out in this candle, like this, like a candle form. Later on, they'll open up into needles. But across your whole tree, they will come in different strength and different number on each bud. Okay, this is a black pine, often only has between 1 to about 4 candles. Whereas this has been let's say a Yatsubusa black pine, which can have 10 to 15 candles in one spot. All right, so they need to be sorted out. But then we would leave 2 candles on each side, and will be equal strength. Let's say, for example, on this one here, we need to first identify, well, what's a stronger one, what's a medium strength, what's a weaker one. Stronger one is like this. You can see they are definitely taller, longer. The medium strength is like the one next to it. It's roughly about 1 centimeters. And the weak one is like this. Its head just barely pushed open, barely moving. Okay, like this one here. Can you see that one there? That's a strong, that's a weak. Okay, so we want to keep 2 candles. So we have 1, 2, equal strength. Well, we can't make that one bigger, but we can slow that one down. So which is by taking the tip out like that. Once you've done that, from my observation, that won't elongate anymore because we've taken the tip out. All right, so when this guy's that's been tipped, pruned, that one, once it reaches certain length, we can just take the tip out. Same thing here, take the tip off. So it's springtime, we have to go around and take the tip out of all the long candles, all the stronger candles.
Is this early spring, mid-spring, late spring?
Early spring, it's pretty much not, don't quote me on the season, but often it also has to do with the vigor of the tree. This tree was reported last year, so it's relatively strong. It's not the strongest tree in terms of vigor, but it's pretty good. So all the candles are elongating, okay? Compared to a tree that's rather weak and sickly even, the candles wouldn't have stretched out this much. So there's probably not a lot to do, but that's a reflection of the lack of strength on that pine. But all this is, when you can see them now in the southern hemisphere, Melbourne, Victoria, we are early September, early spring. So this will be a time for the next 2-3 weeks. The volunteers will go around, other than pinching back the maples, they'll be pinching back the strong candles on the black pines. All right, so we'll be pinching them back, making sure that they are the same amount of strength. Because we need to prepare a tree to lead up to summertime when they are ready to be decandled. We want to make sure that they are as equal in strength as possible. Otherwise, when we decandle them, the next flush come through, they might be stronger at the top, weaker down the bottom. We want to equalize that strength, close the gap as much as we can through 2 things in the spring. One is having the same amount of needles on every shoot and having this equal amount of equal strength candles on every shoot and leaving only 2, no more than 2. Okay, so that will be the spring task, these 2 things. Now, your tree might be in the earlier stages, much earlier stages, that you can, let's say you might have a branch like this. Yeah, that's quite common. So what do we do with this? There's not even any side branches, just a 1 year, 2 years. Well, how do you turn this into something? How do you turn this into actual branches? Okay, so here's what you can do. Depending on where it is on the tree, let's say you have the branches popping out in the lower part of the tree, okay, in like one of the low branches. In fact, when I said I'm contradicting myself, this wouldn't have happened on the lowest branch because it was a weaker branch to begin with. All right, but this most likely will be midway and up the top of the tree. That's why it can be so strong and long like this. Often when it's that case, you can see there's a bare section. This is last year's needle. Okay, last year's new growth. There's nothing growing in there. Hence why we pinch the tip back from the candle so it doesn't stretch that big. Okay, let's say that one there. If we didn't pinch it back, it has the potential to grow to be that big. Once it becomes that big, it's too long for us. It's too long, it's useless, and there's no needles in there. All right, when we pinch it, this there is more what we can expect from it. All right, so that's what a pinching back of the strong candle does. But let's say this is all you have. You've got a long section, but you can see further in, there are new buds forming on that. So if this is just a young branch you have, it's quite safe to cut back to those new buds in there. Okay, so then we can then look at, okay, equal allocation of needles. this has quite a lot of needles. We can then thin them out back to the same amount. So what amount is the same amount? Open across the whole tree in early spring, I would like that to be 10 to 12 pairs. 10 to 12 pairs. Okay. You definitely do not need to count them. Okay, because each rotation, so the tree, you can see the needles, they distributed evenly around the new growth. But often what I do is let's count this. Okay. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's go 4. Let's go again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. About 4 or 5 pairs of needles in one rotation. All right, so often what I like to do is leave roughly 10 to 12 pairs, which is about 2 or 3 rotations of needles, right about there. Okay, that's about 10 to 12 pairs. And then what that would do is the new candles, 1, 2, 3, we have 3 candles in place. If this is up on the top of the tree, I'll remove it back to the 2 little ones. If this is the bottom of the tree, we will then remove the weaker one, keeping the stronger ones, because they are weaker to begin with. Therefore, we keep the stronger ones. All right, so this is what I would do to a low branch like that. And what you can expect to happen is these 2 candles will continue to elongate, and you might get budding from the back here, from needles that we have pruned back. Okay, which hence why we don't perform plucking. Once you pluck, we have removed all the needle sheath, and that's where the new candles, new buds can emerge. You see that bud has emerged in between the needles. Okay, can you imagine you come along, you pluck it out, or you pluck it out, really. That's all that is, literally. All right, so when we're still building a tree on a young material, the best course of action, I would recommend not to pull them out, not to pluck them, but to cut them back like this, because we still need to equalize the allocation of needles, same amount. So we need to make sure that it has the same amount on this branch, on that branch, on every branch. So we need to keep the sheath intact for new buds to form. Okay, so early spring, same amount of needles, 2 candles, same strength. Okay, this is in springtime. So, okay, what do we do in summertime? Okay, so summertime, a couple of things will happen. These guys, these 2 remaining candles in the spring would have stretched out and would have opened up. All right, when they have opened up, try to find you examples. I'm trying to do a bit of magic for you, trying to put something in there. All right. So spring, you have 2 more new branches right there. And if everything goes well, you might get needle buds emerging from here. All right. You might get a few needle buds emerging from there. So imagine spring and summer. All right. So now let's say 3 months has passed. This is where we are. What do we do in summertime? A couple of things. If the needle buds has popped open, has elongated like this, then we do not need all that length at all. This will be cut back to that bud and start building the branch from here. So really in the early stages, we try to transition a stick into something with branches as close as we can. That's definitely not a good branch, okay? But I'm using that as an example. We try to transition and making sure that we have buds emerging from here, then we can start building from that. I'll try to draw a diagram as to how do we transition that there. So you got a trunk, you got a new shoot, new just needles there, and we got candles here and here. Okay, that's what you have. So springtime, we thin them out, leaving the sheath intact, and a few pairs of needles there. But in summertime, this would have opened up. All right, this would have opened up. All right, so we are just coming off the trunk. The aim isn't to build a branch from these two. The aim is to see if we can promote budding from closer in. As close as we can. If we can get a bud there, great. If we can get a bud there, great. Then once we have those things like that, then we can cut all that off. We can remove all that and start building from as close in as we can. My experience, it has not failed me yet. If you do it early enough, you get budding closer in, because that's only 1 year old. You've done the right thing to it, you get back buds from in there. Okay, bud up from the needle buds. And I haven't found one that hasn't done it yet. So I'm gonna back my words. All right, so once we have buds come through, then that can come off. Really, that whole dog can come off. And these buds, by that time, would have opened up into needle form. Like this, okay? And then we can start building our branching, our alternate branching pattern that we talk about. One left, one right, one left, one right, and so forth. All right, so, but we need to transition from spring, same amount of needles on every shoot. We can thin this back with the sheath intact and 2 candles. Summertime, this is what we get. Okay, I'm gonna magically put them back on. All right. If we still want to work with the length, you might say that, okay, that's tiny. That might not even be enough it might be too harsh to remove all that. Then let's keep it there. But what's out here, we can then remove. How many pairs of needles have we left out here?
4 or 5.
Well, right now we've got 10 to 12, right?
10
to 12 right now.
Okay.
10 to 12 pairs. Summertime, we reduce that 10 to 12 from 10 to 12 down to 4 or 5. Okay, so what we do is then we can remove another one, a few more pairs back. Like that. That new buds keep it in place. And the new growth, the new one at the end. If we are happy with the length, we would like to begin to build the branching from that. We can then cut these 2 off. Okay, back to nothing. So we're back to, so the difference between that is, okay, we've got a new bud closer in. We have less needles there, but we have built up the strength with these 2, but now we have removed it. You get multiple smaller buds emerging from that. But let's say in this case, we still want to build it in strength. Then we do the same thing. We thin this back to 4 or 5, and we can thin this back to 4 or 5. Okay, this is that one. All right, we can thin this back to 4 or 5. Back to that. Again, and we'll do that across the whole tree. Try to equalize the strength. But really all I'm aiming for is build up the strength. All right, and hopefully by this one here, by autumn, should go from that to that. All right, and if all things goes well, we should have a couple more popping out there. All right, and that is what we are aiming for, to nurture the 2 new branches. So instead of this in early spring, this is what we get by autumn. All right, you can build this, but this is what we have worked hard for to nurture back. By autumn, then we can cut this back. Then we can start to build the branching. So it turned from this to that in one season. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So we turn multiple needles into buds for us. So that is the progression. Okay, so summertime we reduce the length, but we don't cut it back to them just yet. Okay, need to give them a few more months to really grow. But we need to reduce the tips out a little bit more so that these guys can get a bit more strength. We cannot just cut them back when they are still too weak. Okay, so that's what we get by the end of that. And then the next year, the cycle continues. Okay, so that's sort of what we do when you are building a branch from nothing, just a shoot, into more branches. Okay, so that's the early stages. This is where I'll ask, am I making sense? Any questions? Am I making sense to you, Matt, at least?
Yes, it's definitely becoming clearer. Yep.
Yeah. So it's often we look at that, okay, I don't even know what to do. What do you even do with this? All right, so hopefully that gives you from spring, summer, and autumn. So in 6 months' time, you can transition from this into a branch with a couple of side branches. Then you can begin to build your alternative branching pattern from that. Okay.
And then in autumn, is there anything that, apart from having it back to the 3 buds, excuse me,
Yeah.
is there anything you need to do after that?
I shouldn't have taken away my magic nowadays. They are everywhere. Okay. Let me put them together one more time. I missed it. Now, springtime, you have all that. Summer and autumn. So we're turning all these needles. We've got to turn them into branches. Branches, we need to first then stimulate them into new buds and new shoots. So springtime, I'll go back to one more time. So we will thin all these out. We'll thin all these out. So we're not plucking because we still want back buds to form, middle buds to form from them. So we're thinning them out by removing the needles like that. Knowing fully well, we need to do this to teach the tree that every branch to the tree is important. So when we have the same amount of needles on every branch, same amount of strength candles on every branch, then the tree can begin to equalize, distribute energy and strength evenly to every branch, at least beginning to. So springtime like this, then we'll leave it. By summertime, from my experience, most of this, you get multiple new buds popping out from there. And let's say we only have the 2 there. All right, then we will thin out the candles forming into 2 new shoots. We'll thin out the needles on them too. So, and thin back the needles from 10 to 12 back to 4 or 5. And we don't touch them yet because I need to gain a bit more strength. So we thin out the needles from here and from here. Okay, from last year and this year's. We don't touch this. All right, in autumn time, then what we do is then we look at it and say, okay, these guys have really elongated, have grown from that to that. Do we need the length? This sometimes, if this is at the bottom of the tree, okay, this right here, I'll keep everything. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I'll keep the whole branch down there. But if this is the top of the tree, near the apical region, near the top of the tree, then I will make one cut. I'll remove that. Back to 2 shoots because it's too strong. With all that in place, that's too strong for the top of the tree. So we remove all that and weaken it and begin to grow from here. All right, so with the remaining 2 new shoots come through, I will then still thin it back to 4 or 5 pairs of needles. Okay. Whoop, just lost one. Just lost one. There you go. All right, we thin them back. Back there. In autumn time. Okay, so here you can see we can spring from nothing. Now we got two small branches. Closer we can build the branches from. Okay, so that's often the first step in transitioning and turning a new shoot into a usable branch with bifurcation. Okay, so that's from spring to autumn. And if you do it on early enough on young branches, that's doable. And actually we've done that to all of our trees. They're all set up the same way. All three examples are trees that we have grown from seed. You can see they have abundance of branches and a lot of branches that are quite close, and we set them up already. Okay, so that's how we do them. Let's try to apply the spring task. Equal allocation, same amount of needles on every shoot, and 2 candles with equal strength. Okay, this is probably a 10 to 12-year-old tree that we have grown from seed. The tree has quite a few branches set up all along the length of the tree. Now, actually, perfect example. Can you see the needle buds have formed between the needles? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we've got 12 potential branches waiting to go. So that's why we kept the needles in there. You can see this side, the needles have fallen off. But wherever we kept the needles, they have formed buds. Even that one there, it formed from the sheath, pushed down. The buds, the needles along there, they have dried off, but the buds has formed. Okay, so that's exactly the perfect demonstration to why we trim them back, not plucking them out. Okay, now we have these. We cannot cut them back. It's too early. That's too weak. We need to leave everything at the end growing. But we still need to control them to some degree. So we keep just the 2 candles, and I wouldn't touch it. I would let this gain more strength. But in order for this to gain more strength and these guys can come out, we need to weaken the top. Okay, so that's why we look at the strong areas. Okay, a little bit stronger. You can see how we trim them back. The sheath, they didn't turn into new buds. You can see they have turned brown. They can just fall off. Okay, so up here, we thin them back a little bit. Few pairs of needles. When I said 10 to 12, that was more on a younger tree or a younger branch. Now this is something that we have done that work to it in previous years. So right now we can thin them back to, it already had only much fewer pairs of needles. So this is in the apical region, we're gonna go a bit harder. So this right now we only thin them back to about 4 or 5 pairs right now. Okay, because we need these guys to be weakened so much, these guys can gain strength. So this is one of the steps. We equalize the strength. Okay, well, we just built the tips earlier. I showed you that, so I've done that. All right, so we thin it back. All right, so you can see, compare this to that. Same amount of needles. Okay, so then these guys won't be, she would say, these guys won't be forgiven or forgotten by the tree. And a lot of times when they are forgotten and they become weaker, those buds that we have nurtured will have died off. So we want to make sure that they continue to gain strength by weakening the top. Okay, so we thin it back to that. And again, we got those 2 buds forming, that ugly lump can come off. Okay. Then a few more pairs of needles can come off. We go around here. New buds have formed from the base there too. Okay, but they are too small. Right now they are too small. They haven't even opened up yet. They are too, before they need to open up into needle form before we can cut them back too. All right, so they are too small, but fully knowing well, later on we're going to chop this and that. both of them back to these two buds, but not right now. So we need to thin out these two enough. All right, and break the candles, which I have already done. All right, so 4 or 5 pairs on that, 4 or 5 pairs on that. And this one is very congested. Has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 new candles all emerging, all right about there. All right, so we can, that's a stop. We can keep just the 2. 1, 2. Often when you have multiple ones in there, when you can't decide which one to cut off, often the easy one will be, well, let's just choose the 2 that you want to keep, that everything else comes off. And which 2? This is a branch that comes down. So I would like to keep the 2 lateral branches, which now will be this and that. Okay, this and that will be 2 lateral, and everything else then will come off. And then we've thinned out a few more pairs of needles from that. You can see how up the top region where I have thinned out, they are also same amount of needles. This hasn't been done. You can see this is a lot fuller, a lot more body. So we need to work our way down. We've got 1 branch here. Okay. There's a new bud coming through. Let's thin that one out a little bit. We are aiming for every shoot to be the same. When there's a huge discrepancy in terms of vigor, in terms of the needle count, I actually would like a few more pairs down the bottom and a few less pairs. Again, give you these guys a bit more of a head start to catch up. Okay, so we can go a bit harder on the top here in terms of removing the amount of needles from them. Okay, so that top section is done. Now down to this branch. Now this branch, we are keeping it as a branch. So the branch come out, it's actually rather thick already. There's a thinner one, there's a thinner one. You can see this is very, very thick now. Because of the fact that we have these 2 smaller ones closer in, this will now come off. All right, so this heavy one, the heavy one will come off. You can see an ugly knot right there. It has stretched out. Not good for us. So we go back to the smaller ones. Okay. And that's the renewal of a system that we talked about over and over again. The tree doesn't know that it needs to do that. So we need to nurture the back buds and go back to them when they're ready. But can you see how this one here, it had a long branch, a long and thick branch. I can tell because of that little stub there. Once it was cut, you can see these 2 branches that go split sideways. And that angle is too wide, way too big. It need to have been brought in and wide there. Okay, we need the angle to be like that, not like that. Okay, so when you're choosing which one to cut, often people tell you to take out the center one, which I agree to some degree. If the center one is huge, then you definitely take the center one out. But don't forget to bring the 2 that go sideways to bring them back in a little bit with your wiring. But if they say all 3 candles, okay, let's say all 3 candles are similar size. So instead of taking the center one out, often what I would like to do is, okay, this is the bottom of the tree. Let's say it's bottom of the tree, let's keep the stronger one. I might then take off this weaker one there, keeping just these 2 so the angles are tighter. We don't need to resort to having to wire them back in. Okay, but of course, if this is huge, then definitely the center one comes off. All right, so the difference is, looking at if the strength are almost the same, then I prefer to keep the 2, either center or left, or the center one or the right hand side. Okay, keep the angle tighter so that we don't need to resort to having to wire them in. They're already on a tight angle. And then again, we go through thin air a bit more on each pairs of needles. Those candles are long, break it, take the tip out. Some of you might ask, why don't you just cut them? We have found that the logic is they are needles waiting to burst open. If you cut them, almost like you're cutting the needles. In fact, they haven't stretched up, but they are cutting the needle tips. So I find that it's probably more aesthetically nicer, I suppose, if you just break the tips out instead of cutting away the candles like that. Okay, so you can potentially still damage the candles like that. So once you remove it like that, you're not damaging anything. Okay, you minimize damage really. So, all right, so we'd like to just take the tip out, so you can see all those has the tips taken out. That one there too. All right, then we'll thin out the needles a bit more on this. All right, we've done the top part, and we're down to just this few. So the same thing, we'll go through them. Big candle, we'll break it. We only have two, so big one comes shorter. We just take the tips out, and then just thin out a few more pairs of needles from there. All right, a few more pairs of needles. Okay. I'll make a point here. You can see on this branch, the needle tips are brown. Okay, that one there, last year, in thinning them out, a lot of times we're left with needles that long. And often, just to make it easier for us to wire and to work on the trees, often what we would do when you're still training trees, to make it easier for us to get our hands around, well, often we'll grab a bunch and cut it off like that. Just to make it shorter so that it's easier for us to put our, can you imagine, try to wire this compared to try to wire that with all the needles in place on the tree this small, with all the spacing there, it's just too tight, too hard. We'll often do that to just make it easier for us to work on them. Hence the brown tips. I personally am not in favor of cutting them back just to make them look shorter, to make it look nicer. Because if we do the right thing to them next year, the year after, we can slowly get there. But I'm not against the practice of this too, because next year they will be replaced by new candles and new buds. Okay, so, but I would say if it's still training, I would like to keep the solar panels. I often refer them to as solar panels. This would do more than this because it's not been damaged. This is full. That's been damaged. It's been cut in half. So the function of that is greatly reduced and compromised compared to that. All right. So often when you're still training trees, I prefer to make sure the tree maintain enough health, enough vigor to give us more branching coming through, budding up. When you compare to that, I often would not care about the needle length so much. But when it comes to wiring, sometimes just make it easier to just cut it there and we can do a bit of wiring. Okay. All right, so that's been done. This down here has multiple new candles. Again, we're just keeping the two. That's weak, that's strong, that's strong. Okay, so these are the bottom branch. Let's keep the two stronger ones. And these two points upward need to come off. All right, keeping just the two. And then this one here too. Okay, this is actually coming off that branch. Okay. All right. Weak one. Medium strength one. All right, we'll keep two strong ones. Two strong ones. All right, the last, we thin out the needle a little bit. Often the bottom ones comes up. Okay, just make it a bit neater, a bit tidier. Okay, then the last bit is this branch here. Okay. All right. Long needles. All right, let's thin them out. So in this case, these are very long. I'm not going to cut them back shorter because I still need that to gain a bit more strength. All right, so Thin this out. All right, in fact, I missed this branch. All right, we'll thin out this. Okay. As far as I'm concerned, that's been thinned out enough for the moment. And the tree will be fed. Contrary to what I mentioned earlier about maples, we do not want to feed them, in terms of Japanese maple, we do not feed them in early spring because it pushes out a lot of long growth and we're pinching, so it's counterproductive to what we want to achieve. In the case of black pine though, we can feed right now in early spring to build up the strength until about Christmas time. Then we can come along. This tree is well on its way to be refined and to build final branching. So we can, by Christmas time, we can then knock all this new growth out. By that time, they will become like this. We can then cut them all off, then go for the next new set. So definitely more important now to build up the strength, feed it, then give it enough strength, then we can cut it off. All right, in Christmas time, just before Christmas time here in Melbourne. All right, so that will be the thing to do. So as far as springtime is concerned, on a tree like this, same amount of needles and equal strength candles, and keeping just the two. And Matt should show you a before and after shot. Now that's been thinned out. And now if we wish to, now all this can be wired. Yeah. Now I'll show you a tree that has the same work done and being wired. Once we have thinned out a tree such as this, we'll cut them back, we have reduced the size, we have equalized the strength. We need to then position the branches into proper location. Otherwise, you can see a lot of them are pointing upwards. But in pointing upwards, that will mean that all the branches pointing upwards, they will gain strength. And the ones down low will be weaker. So but we need to then bring them down, bring them out. Okay, put them into proper position. That's also another way we can equalize the strength. So when the pole pointing upwards, the weaker ones grow weaker. So we need to bring them down, fan them out as much as I not to fan them out, to spread them out. Okay, so we need to do that. So this is a example that has been wired and have the branch repositioned. All right, so now you can see by doing that, they are all down and up, down and up. I've seen quite a few people, they've done their pines, and then sometimes they do that. They have them point straight upwards like that. I personally don't really do that much with my trees, but they need to point up. They cannot go just sideways. They cannot point downwards. They have to point upwards. But I don't really do that to them. I kind of find that's not so nice to look at, that elbow in there. Okay, I'll have them point upwards slightly. Obviously, when you point them downwards, they will take them a bit longer. When the branch is pointing downwards, new growth needs to come out and go up. Whereas they are pointing upwards already, they are in the proper direction towards the sun. Okay, so when I like that, we have really in effect weakened the tree even further by pointing them downwards. All right, so when I like that, we wire them down, but we need to wire the tips up again. All right, but I'm saying I don't really like to wire them up so high. Just as long as they're pointing upwards, we have helped the tree transition into growing upwards again. All right, so all these are wired slightly upwards, slightly angle upwards a little bit. Okay, so that's on black pine, a bit of a rundown on black pine. And we'll definitely do a follow-up on all the trees that we have worked on today in summer month. And they can show you, okay, that's what we did, and we might be able to do, okay, in spring, 3 months ago, this is what they look like, and now this is what they look like now. So you can see the progression from each tree at different stages. Okay.